So as Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor of Florida and floundering presidential candidate, grapples with the strongest hurricane to hit his state in more than a century, his biggest and most important supporter is none other than the man who he insults and belittles all the time on the campaign trail, Democratic President Joe Biden. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, so as most of you know, and hopefully none of you are experiencing this, but Hurricane Idalia, I think, has made landfall in Florida after buffeting its way towards the state. I think it was like 250,000 people, I read somewhere, are without power. It's the strongest hurricane to make landfall in Florida in over a century. It's a colossal threat to the lives of Americans who are living there, and probably also emblematic of increasing climate change. Ron DeSantis has actually suspended his campaign temporarily to go back and actually govern his state, even though he was, reelected back in November 2022. His eyes have been elsewhere. He's much more focused on inflicting himself on the rest of the country. But he's decided to go back to Florida and pretend to be governor. And the strongest support, the most fervent support that he's getting, is from Democratic President Joe Biden, who he constantly insults and belittles along the way in the campaign trail. I mean, Ron DeSantis has been particularly nasty towards Biden in a way that's perhaps second only to Trump. And yet, when the chips are down, and Biden has proved this again and again and again, the president sets politics aside and enthusiastically supports even Republican governors who insult him, belittle him, and try to attack his character. So I'm going to play a couple of clips here, and we're going to unpack all of it. But this is the president answering a question from a reporter saying, hey, you're running for re-election. Ron DeSantis is running against you, first in the Republican primary, but ultimately in the general election. His goal is to dethrone you or to take your place. Are there any politics involved in the cooperation between the federal government and Florida? And this is what President Biden had to say.
Mr. President, Governor DeSantis is also running for president. You are running for re-election. Do you sense any politics in your conversations with him about this issue?
No, believe it or not, I know that sounds strange, especially how the nature of politics today. But, I was down there when the last major storm. I spent a lot of time with him, walking from village to from community to community, making sure he had what he needed to get it done. I think he trusts my judgment and my desire to help. And I trust him to be able to suggest that this is not about politics. It's about taking care of the people of the state.
So there you go. Couldn't have said it better myself. The president, as he, again, for whatever faults you want to say about Joe Biden, you want to say that he's too old. You want to say that his mental acuity isn't what it once was. You want to say that, you want to cast aspersions about his family, whatever you want. But one thing that I think you can't make a strong case for is that President Biden lacks empathy. And to his point about meeting Ron DeSantis' needs, it's like the strong crisis-driven cooperation between Ron DeSantis and Joe Biden, and this is coming from Florida politics, continues through Hurricane Idalia. That's the take from Wednesday's White House briefing as expressed by FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. The president contacted Governor DeSantis to let him know that the federal family continues to be there to support him. The governor expressed that all of his needs are being met currently. The president reiterated that if anything is needed from the federal government, we will be there to support. And we have over 1,000 personnel currently deployed, prepared to support not just Florida, but all of our states that are in the path as needed. As a matter of fact, days before Idalia made landfall, President Biden approved very quickly a federal emergency situation for Florida and ordered FEMA to pre-deploy, to basically get ready to go in and meet Governor DeSantis' needs. That's what Biden does. And I'll also, as he mentioned in the clip we just played, not only does President Biden have a history of being empathetic and quick to support red states or blue states led by red governors, but the fact of the matter is, he has a history of this. And with respect to Florida, at least two other major instances, when there was that condo collapse in 2021, President Biden went down there, even though Ron DeSantis was a vociferous critic of President Biden already by that point. And then again in 2022, during, I think it was a tropical storm or a hurricane, again, President Biden was in Florida, not only offering personal support and condolences, but again, the full support of the federal government as well. So time and time again, President Biden has done his duty as the chief executive of this nation and has put country above party. Now the question becomes, what's the alternative? Well, we do know how Donald Trump handles situations like these because we got reports again and again and again throughout the Trump administration that Donald Trump liked to punish his political opponents during their times of need. Trump likes to punish blue states, according to insiders, even when they're burning. One former Trump administration official told me the president made a very clear political statement saying, if the people of California don't like me politically, do not provide money, don't provide disaster relief. And this is dated from the 15th of September in 2020. The day after California began burning, Donald Trump boarded a plane for a quick stop in Iowa while on the way to visit the border wall. And it goes into detail about one of the wildfires that spread through California at the time. And again, President Trump at the time made it very clear to his officials, to his supporters, that he was going to be slow to provide aid as a form of political retribution. Joe Biden would never do this. Joe Biden would never say anything like this. Once again, demonstrating the vast moral superiority of President Biden over Donald Trump. But it wasn't just in this instance. Trump threatens funding to Democratic-led cities over unrest during the George Floyd protests, the mass protests, the biggest mass protest event in the history of the United States. I think it was like 20 million people across all 50 states for like a year and a half to 2 years, right? And at the time, there were pockets, some pretty profound pockets of unrest. And Donald Trump said that he wasn't going to provide any sort of aid because those were Democratic-led cities. And again, it was out of spite. President Biden would never say something like that if civil unrest was going on in a red state or in a city in any state led by a Republican mayor. It's just not the case. Donald Trump also, during COVID, was saying things like, why should taxpayers help bail out blue states? Because there was a time when COVID was like disproportionately high, in particular in like California and other places. I don't know why this thing isn't going away. This does this every single time. I don't like how the Hill does this. But they initially, during the outbreak, these high population blue cities and blue states, like New York's the biggest point, it was effectively ground zero for COVID in the United States. It was hit the hardest, at least initially. And again, Donald Trump was acting out of spite. Why should taxpayers have to help out Democratic states? And again, just out of pure spite and malice. And again, Trump says that coronavirus bailouts for blue states are unfair to Republicans. Now, what's interesting is, of course, we know over time, for various reasons, that the people and counties and districts and states that were hit the hardest by COVID, where the infection rates were the highest and deaths were the highest, were in red states and in Trump voting counties, right? President Biden, when he took over the country, when he was inaugurated and became president, I don't recall any reports or any even suggestions that he was thinking about withholding support or thinking about making support more difficult for red states and red cities and red counties that were disproportionately high in infections and deaths because they refused to get vaccinated. I don't recall that being the case. So the bottom line is this. This is one of the many factual reaffirming distinctions between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I know sometimes people get upset when I use this language, but it's just the truth. Joe Biden isn't perfect. But based on everything we know about these two men, given that they've been public figures in one form or another for the past 40, 50 years, Joe Biden is factually, it's not a matter of opinion, it's simply a fact. And if you don't like it, you're wrong, and you'll always lose the debate. But Joe Biden is a better man than Donald Trump. He's smarter. He's less corrupt. He's much more empathetic. He's much more compassionate. He's, if this matters to you, much more devout in his religion. From every vector, Joe Biden is a better person than Donald Trump. And if you're a conservative, if you're a centrist and you're struggling with that, I would invite you to do some serious self-reflection. Observe the facts as they are. You know in your heart, and you would have no evidence to the contrary, that Joe Biden would ever do or say the terrible things that Donald Trump has said and done. So just make your peace with it. Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump, and there's nothing you can do that will change that fact.